So our program today, Ibrahim Ali, the co-executive director of Gardening the Community, will be talking to us about food justice and race and hip hop. We first met Ibrahim like five and a half years ago when Gardening the Community, his organization, invited Mass Slavery Apology, which was our name at that time, to have an information table at their summer farmers market at Mason Square in Springfield. And that gave those of us who were able to go there a wonderful opportunity to learn more about food justice in general and the work of Gardening the Community in particular. And they're such an amazing organization. We're working for urban sustainability and working extensively with youth in that area. Gardening the Community is a food justice organization in Springfield based in the kind of neighborhood that can be described as a food desert. No decent grocery store, really difficult to buy healthy food in an easy way, especially if you don't have a car. They focus on urban agriculture, sustainable living, youth development, and creating healthy and equitable communities. The young people in their training program receive a stipend as they learn about all this stuff. They also become farmers, growing fruits and vegetables on formerly vacant and abandoned lots. And I had the opportunity a few years ago to have a tour of one of those, and it was pretty impressive. It was cool. They sell their produce at their own markets and also to local restaurants and bodegas in their community. Ibrahim came to his job at Gardening the Community with a background in both youth development and food justice. He's worked there since 2009, originally as the co-director for youth and programs, now as the co-executive director. He tells us that he has 5 amazing sons and an independent record label called Burnt Berry. And now here's Ibrahim to tell you about food justice, hip hop, and race.
Hello? Okay, cool. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me out here. I'm going to try to get this right so you don't have to stumble around here. Thank you for inviting me, for sure. I was kind of disappointed in something that happened prior to me coming here. I'm just going to be honest about it. Someone had advised someone else to tell me that I shouldn't come here today to do this talk. They didn't really provide any particular reason as to why I shouldn't come. So when I first got here, I did ask. One thing I noticed was that there was a name change, so I thought that maybe that might have something to do with it. But the person never directly contacted me, so I figured if there was a reason that was so amazing that they didn't have the time to ask me or directly address me, I felt that I would still come because that's just what, after looking at your website and seeing your intentions of what this group was about, I decided to come regardless.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of things that I would want to touch on. I hope people didn't come expecting a show. That's not going to happen, unfortunately. But I did want to kind of talk about my experience being the director, one of the executive directors of Gardening the Community, and like how hip hop, which is the culture that I have come up in, has influenced how I look at growing food, how I look at running an organization like GTC, and et cetera. So my background, I definitely would consider myself a city mouse as opposed to a country mouse. Definitely in my family, my immediate family, there's no farming no farmers happening. There wasn't any land to do any farming with. I should also make note of that. But I think that one of the things that attracted me initially to Gardening the Community was the simple fact that they had this youth component, which I heavily believed in, and I thought was one of the things that in Springfield you don't really see. There's not really a lot of opportunities that are given to youth that are not involved with, after-school programs, trying to get numbers, obviously the school system, et cetera, et cetera. And this was a great opportunity to kind of bring a lot of different interests that I had to the forefront. So let's rewind. How many of y'all familiar with hip-hop culture, with hip-hop music? I'm sure many of y'all have done so. How many are kind of remiss at what they see as hip-hop right now, and what maybe you remember it being back a few years back? If you are, yeah. So I think, it kind of is reflective of the way that, kind of farming is looked at also in this lens of current times, and that there was a period in time in which farming was kind of frowned upon in the black community that I'm a part of. It's very hard to get people to consider farming. It has been in the past. I don't know about now in certain places, but it's been very difficult to get people involved with farming. There's been so much land that has been taken away from people of color, particularly black people in the United States. And obviously the history, the name of your group is Mass Slavery Apologies. Obviously the history of farming in this country for people like me is not really a good one. I've come to look at that experience in different ways, because as someone who has embraced farming in many aspects of my life, there's some knowledge that those people have that has been indispensable to how modern farming has developed. And so, despite the fact that such a horrible condition that stretched over that amount of time, there was a lot of knowledge that was brought over that allows us to enjoy some of the things that we enjoy right now. And so, those are some of the things that I've taken from this experience of farming, among other things. So when I I really shouldn't have been chosen as the director of this organization. The fact that they gave me the keys, it was one of those things that I was kind of shocked when they did that. Because I didn't have this farming background, and I can't really say that my resume, what you want to call it, it's hard to convey the type of experiences that you have when you're someone involved with the music industry, and then trying to explain that to people who are not a part of that world. The one thing that helped me, like I said before, is just the fact that I worked with a lot of youth. So kind of being introduced to the farming world was done by the young people that were in the organization at that time for me. They taught me a lot of things about growing. That first season, I was the one that was stepping on, onions, and, I think I might have one or two incidences of pulling out things that I shouldn't have pulled out. And so I'm very, when people do that, there was one of the young men I'm really thinking about right now named Java. He, in his first year of working with us, he went to go weed out the asparagus area. And he really weeded it out. And I remember the youth were they thought that I was going to go off. So it was like silence when I walked onto the field that day. But we definitely mended that little incident, because I know what it's like to have to go through that, to not know when you're out there on the farm, what's what. And trying to, avoid the bees and swatting everything in your way. But, you get used to a lot of that stuff. And I think that, so when I saw Java do that, it was actually heartwarming. I was like, oh, I remember when I pulled up half the onions, My kind of continued education and learning has led me to look at farming in ways that I had looked at hip-hop music. Hip-hop has these kind of foundational things that have traditionally been the way that you express the culture. One of them is DJing. which is like the foundation of hip hop. It's like it's the music, you know. It's James Brown, it's Sly and the Family Stone, it's a lot of these old obscure records that people would use and try to find certain parts of it and remix it and kind of change it to really get to the part where people would dance. I mean, that's what it was about. It was like finding that part of the record that where everything kind of broke down so that people can bring that back and people could start dancing. And so, you know, I've kind of taken that little essence of the culture and have, since that is such an integral part of it, I've come to discover that the soil is, the soil is such an integral part of the work that we do in terms of growing food. And just like in hip hop, like our soil in our city has gone through tremendous ups and downs. When I think about like the biggest lot that we have now is on Walnut Street. And when we approached the city to purchase it, and when we finally purchased that property, which is a long story, at some point maybe I'll come back and we'll talk about just how to deal with land and cities and things like that. But you know, when we finally purchased the land, or we were at close to that point, I had went with a young man named Tyler who was working with us at the time, and you know, we did our soil sample, and you know, we dug our little trenches, little 13-foot holes. We got the samples. We got, you know, did it in a few different places. Got it together, sent it to Logan Labs. We didn't send it to you, man. Sorry. Sent it to Logan Labs in Ohio. They gave us some feedback, and everything looked great. So we were like happy. Everybody's patting themselves on the back because we had this idea that the land was contaminated. There was a chance that that could have been the case. And after you know, getting that feedback back, we, you know, again, we thought we were kind of clear in the shape. You know, a few weeks later, you know, we're kind of we got this greenhouse we're trying to develop, and we need to excavate some of the land to get it prepared for the greenhouse. And the guy that was doing the excavation, he comes across in a certain area in the back, like kind of, when we looked at the soil, you know, you could see like different layers, right? And one of the layers was like the best soil that you could have in like Western Mass. Whatever is in Hadley, that's what was there, you know? So we were happy. I mean, it was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, we're gonna make a lot of money, you know? We're gonna be rich. We're gonna have this dope soil, tell stories about the soil. But then he told us that, well, right above that was a layer of coal ash. So my dreams were shattered, basically. And what we ended up needing to do is kind of just lay in that area fallow. We don't grow there. Luckily, it's kind of way in the back of the site, so we had only intended to compost there. And what we're doing is we're growing like raspberries and blueberries because they don't pull up any of those that metal. Nothing like that will come up in those.
So coal ash has bad metals in it?
Potentially, yes. You just don't want to eat anything that's going to be. I mean, think about it. Would you want, you know, like kale or collard greens coming from a location that was pulling up metals that might be toxic?
Oh, sure, no. I just didn't know what coal ash.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess there's another thing about our site is that it's one of the sites is that it's in an area where a lot of the Civil War staging used to happen. Because the armory, as y'all might know, was in Springfield up until 1960, whatever. All of the weapons of the United States were made at this armory, right? And so during the Civil War, they had a lot of staging things that would happen up in that area. And, you know, when they were excavating, they were also finding like we found like a couple like Civil War buttons that the guy took. Yeah. We wanted to, you know. Anyway, you know, so we, you know, that just kind of brings out for me like the soil, how important it is, and you know, the music for you as well as most people is such an important part of your life, you know. DJing has been, you know, something, and hip hop music is definitely something that has kind of, you know, I don't want to say it saved me. That's kind of cliche and corny. But, you know, in many respects, it kept me as a young man kind of focused on things other than what was happening around me at the time. It really kept me and my cousin, who's a crazy person, and got me into a lot of trouble. It was never me, by the way. But yeah, so you know, me and him, like we and other people that were around us at the time, most of us have gone on and done a lot of great things in music. And from this city, which is from Springfield, or many you know, people in Boston don't really like that, but it's just, that's what it is, you know. So another, you know, kind of thing about hip hop is MCing, and most people know that as rapping. Like people, that's what you see when you turn on, unfortunately, videos. You see that is the main kind of aspect of hip hop music that really gets the most acclaim and what have you. For me, I'm not a Luddite. I don't think that everything in the future is bad or that the technology is necessarily bad or whatever. But there are things about what I understand have led to the kind of music culture, and then again, in a broader sense, the popular culture coming from hip hop that don't really reflect the full spectrum of what is there. And I think, you know, kind of looking at the MC aspect of hip hop, which is a simple, it's a storytelling thing, it's a communication thing, it's someone conveying to you their experiences, their understanding of the world, and kind of you as the listener kind of being absorbed in that and being taken on a trip. And, you know, I remember I went to a workshop, and and it was a very kind of earthy experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was very cerebral, it was very oral, it was like, you know, outside. And I remember there was a lady that she kind of went inside she kind of raised her hand to talk. She said that, you know, that what she would do to kind of help her tomatoes grow, she would lay down on the ground and like kind of become a tomato, and you know, and like talk to the tomatoes and stuff like that. So, no doubt. So I was like, word, like this is some heavy stuff. Like you know, coming from the music world, like you know, you can get to that. I can feel that. Now, I tried to tell the young people I work with, yeah, we should be talking to the vegetables. I don't tell them to lay down and become a tomato because that would, you know, I don't know how they would think about me. But, you know, I definitely strongly encourage them to talk to the vegetables that we grow, and to, you know, just let them know how you're feeling, like, you know, talk to them. And I think that, you know, some people look at me like that, but then I see, like, after time goes on, like, some of the kids are actually, you know, embrace that concept. And it's something that, you know, I think that, you know, the communication thing is important, even for something like this, you know. For me to come here, to come to Greenfield, for you to come out, be willing to do that, we're having this communication. This is me emceeing in many respects, you know what I mean? There's just no music, and it's just not a cool atmosphere. No, I'm just kidding. Very cool in a church, I love church. But, you know, so, but this is what, you know, this is what I have come to understand, you know, one of the roles of being a director and being involved with the food movement really is about, and that's talking to people and engaging with people and being open to interacting with folks. I think that there's a lot of that is really missing nowadays in our climate, and we tend to, you know, shy away from people who don't agree with us. And I just don't think that that's the way. You can't live like that, you know. I don't expect anyone to agree with me and what I believe necessarily, but I'm open to what other people have to say. That's how you learn, that's how you grow. And I really, as an organization, you know, we are really about that. Like, I think that we've embraced that a great deal. And I hope we can do more in the future. So another kind of big part of hip hop, and it's really the part that I have learned a lot about over the years. It's definitely something that, as being someone that was born in New York City, like you know, it was ubiquitous to the world around me, going back and forth between New York and Massachusetts, and that's graffiti, the art of the culture. It's not as you know, so, there's two aspects of it. From one, a friend of mine, this guy named Mozart, not that one, but a different one. We used to have these debates because he's from the Lower East Side, and he had this idea of not so much the art, but the vandalism part of it, which he, you know, strongly believed that, you know, it was many folks would call them toys, and that vernacular toys would be somebody that's kind of faking the funk. Do you get that? Yeah. Perfect. So he, you know, he was very like harsh against those type of individuals. Myself, I see it all as part of the same. I mean, there's the vandalism part of it, which is not. I don't know if some of you might own businesses, so there is. You know, I can respect when someone doesn't want somebody writing on their building. I get it. But, you know, there's a little part of me that really likes that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that really likes that part of that world, you know? And you know, the other part of it, though, like just like the mural part, the subway part of it, the rejection of the status quo part of it, the beauty of it. I mean, I don't know if you've ever walked down the street and you see a big giant graffiti piece on a wall. It's a shocking thing, you know what I'm saying? And then you think about that, a lot of these people are just doing this from their mind. They never had any formal training. It becomes that much more impressive. I've been able to be in contact and have close friendships with people who are, you know, some of the best graffiti artists in New York City, in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, in addition to just going around the world and connecting with folks. And so it's something that I really have learned to love. Graffiti is like, it's just an amazing, you know, it's just dope, you know what I mean?
Will you have a place for questions at some point?
Absolutely. And so, you know, colors, like how colors work, how colors affect your senses. Thinking about, you know, kind of taking that graffiti and the colors and everything that comes with it, and then kind of making that, you know, fitting that into a garden space, a farm space. And so, you know, what I've tried to do, because I work with the young people directly on kind of planning things out, is like we plan colors. Like we think about how colors are going to affect the type of insects that we bring in. We think about ways that we want to, you know, kind of mix different things. I never thought that I would be knowing flowers and caring about the different colors in a flower arrangement. Like, that's something that I actually do now. It's shocking. But it's just so amazing to me now, and I think that it stems from my curiosity around the graffiti, and, you know, incorporating permaculture and landscaping. Like, you have like it's almost like you're creating another type of painting, and whether that be, you know, the painting is all green because it's a field of you know, spinach or whatever. Just the colors and the amazing kind of array of things that you can grow in the different colors. It's like the young people, as well as myself, I'm speaking for me definitely, you know, it's a mind and a kind of a soul stirring type of thing when you can sit down and see and really just kind of absorb, you know, being in in the presence of that. And, you know, we encourage, and we've had people that have come to our site, a lot of the neighbors and things like that, people walk by, and they'll just come and sit down and just sit there. And you know, we don't ask questions, we don't say, hey, what are you doing? We just say, what's up, and let them stay. You know what I mean? Because I think people, everybody, we all need that. Grab some more tea here. I have definitely come to respect those people who have taken like their understanding of those things to like higher levels, because I realize like it takes a lot of time to start to study, kind of the mixing of all these different elements, and so salute anybody here that's doing that for sure. So one of the other, or kind of the last, not the last, but I'm going to kind of touch on this one, and then maybe we'll hit something else. The other part of hip hop that I have kind of made this connection with would be like the b-boying. Many of y'all would know that as, as breakdancing. B-boying would be more of the proper term, b-girl, b-boy. Simply because breakdancing was a word that was made up by the media. So the b-boy or the b-girl is the break boy. When I mentioned earlier, the part of the record that has the break, that is the part that you want to dance to. And so, so kind of looking at that in terms of the physicality of the dance itself, had me think about how we kind of operate at the tools, how we are utilizing our bodies to do the weeding, to do the planting. I like to hear when our kids are in pain that I work with. Everybody was like, this guy's crazy. Because I think that it's important that they have those physical pains in terms of being out doing the work. Like they need to feel it, you know what I mean? One thing that happens is when we go through a season, there's always a point in the season, like right now when we are doing more theoretical work, for lack of a better word. So right now, when I leave here, I'm going to go with our youth, and we're going to be looking at a lot of literature around farming and everything like that. So and looking at seed books and kind of getting these folks familiar with some of the terms and different concepts just around urban agriculture. And so there's a group of kids that have done, like, they did the summer with us. They went through the pain of taking that broad fork and doing, mad rolls and, getting on the ground. So they're like the veterans. And then you'll have the newer youth who don't know anything about that yet, right? And the other youth will really put it on them like they're about to experience the worst Freddy Krueger nightmare ever. Like they'll tell them, oh, it's so hard in the summer, the pain. Mr. Ali doesn't let us go to the bathroom. He doesn't let us take breaks. There's no water. The sun's melting, so they gas it up to this extreme level. And I'm just looking at these kids like, please don't quit the program because of what you're hearing. But it just kind of reinforces this idea, like, they have experienced that and they've gotten through it. And they persevered. I mean, we were working last year, the temperatures, when it's 90 degrees or what have you, we try to work early in the morning. We don't work in that, the height of those hours of the heat. But, we're outside and we're having to run things and do our CSA. And they have gained that sturdiness to see through something from beginning to end, despite what might happen in between. And it makes me think about other folks that, when the physicality of that, like other cats that I know that were b-boys who, despite being, 50 some of them years old, they can still get on the floor. Like if they were here right now, they could get on the floor and do a windmill, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a rare thing to have, to maintain that style and that integrity, to keep that thing going, even though you're not receiving any accolades or what have you for it. The other kind of things that I've embraced around hip-hop that have really helped with doing or running this organization have been like entrepreneurialism. Right? Okay. You know what I'm talking about. That's something that I learned early on. we got signed to a record label off of Electra Records, like right out of high school. And kind of one of the things that we learned kind of early on was that these people really don't love us. They really are not looking out for our best interests. And so we decided, you know, despite what other people were saying, we decided to jump ship early. And doing that meant that we had a choice to either kind of fold or follow the example of Sam Cooke and James Brown and Wu-Tang and all these other people who at that period in time, there was a little moment in hip hop where people were really doing an independent thing. So we were able to work with ABB Records and Raucus and all these other labels that really helped establish a more independent way of putting out and creating music. And Gardening the Community is a feisty group of people. They have been since the start of the organization, even before I got there. When the city took land that was kind of grandfathered to the organization, a community garden. This is like when it first started. The young people and the people who were kind of running the organization at the time, like they fought back. They tried to fight against the city. And this is when the group didn't have any, friends in the city, when, they thought there was just a bunch of whatever people doing whatever they were doing. They fought back hard and lost, and had land taken from them that didn't get utilized until, 10, 15 years later. And when that happened a second time on the site that they eventually did give back, the people who were running there at that time, they didn't fold. They decided to keep going. They saw another parcel of land on Hancock Street and Lebanon Street in Springfield, and approached the owner. And even though they were rejected initially, the persistence of just kind of checking in allowed that land to eventually come into the fold of the organization. And so, our kind of credo has been one, first, to ask for forgiveness and not permission. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to not simply just take no for an answer. And I think that, when you're dealing with land and property, some of which has like questionable backgrounds, and you're not sure, in some cases, like who the owner of some of the land is, and even if the city might own some spaces and what have you, but there's private ownership of certain land that the city has no jurisdiction over. And those are the areas oftentimes that are the most neglected. Luckily, our particular parcel on Walnut Street is a mix of both. But there's this idea that, you have to persevere despite the cards given to you. And I think that GTC is a prime example of that. So I don't know, what time we got here?
11 o'clock.
And we've
Okay.
got till 12.
Oh, God.
Don't worry, we got a lot of questions.
Okay. Because I have to, like I said, I have to step out at a certain time, but I want to be respectful of the time that we have left. And so, questions. Might as well get to that
Yes.
part of the game.
You can bring this microphone.
If this was a smaller group, I would have asked people earlier on if there was something that directly that they wanted to hear me address. I would have did that, but then the group got too big. So.
Well, I love the way you are explaining some things through the metaphor of gardening and hip hop, and I just had to say I love the idea of when you were talking about the break boys. So that's kind of the weather and the season and like there's a certain time when there's a break in the music of the soil and the sun,
Absolutely.
and then they have to get out gardening
That's right.
or weeding. Now this is weeding time. Now this is this time.
Right.
So it's just it was really fun to hear that. And I was also curious as far as graffiti goes, just your opinion on like 5 points, because that's not, you know, I guess it became vandalism and then they won that, which was a great victory. But when 5 Points is a place where there's where the 5 Points all meet, where Gangs of New York was that was happening, but way back when. But where there's a huge city block that's graffitied,
Well, not anymore.
curated.
They took that.
Yes, but they all got paid, right? I think there was a victory, and people got paid for their work by the company. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay.
And so, but it was kind of curated, so that's why I was curious about your opinion of that, because it was kind of a gallery, which I've been there a couple times and I loved it.
Open gallery that you could see from the train. It
Yeah,
was dope.
yeah, incredible.
I mean, you're talking about, what happens when gentrification and things kind of come into an area that used to be ignored. And I would say, that's a small fear, not fear, but it's a concern of mine in terms of what we're doing with GTC and the sites we have. I remember many months back, reading an article in, I think it was the Times or something, about what are the indications or qualities of a great place to live. And one of those things was community gardens. So when I think about, well, what we have, we're where we're at now, we built this farm stand. How long are we going to be able to say that the community will remain? I don't know if it's good to remain the same all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's something in certain places that has a intrinsic value that you don't want to lose. And when through forces that are man-made kind of facilitate the establishment of these areas in the first place,
It's not raw anymore.
and then other forces come in and say, well, now this place is going to be different, without really consulting with the people who've been there, that is a cause for concern. And it's a cause for concern whether or not we're contributing to that, in whatever way. Obviously, there's a lot of other forces that are kind of resulting in the prices in apartments and whatnot in Springfield going up, and land, kind of the taxes that people are charging to go up. I don't know if it's the casino, I don't know if it's us, but from what I understand, it has happened.
Which, like that whole thing you just said, really is aligned with your experience with being co-opted, your music, by the Electra, I guess, yeah.
How does the organization support itself? Or, where do the finances for to pay the students and pay your salary and others come from?
We write a lot of grants, and we sell the produce that we grow. And we do fundraisers. We do a pancake breakfast every year, which is cool. I wish they would have waffles.
Coming up soon?
It's in November. It's in November. Yeah.
Get on their email list.
Yeah. Maybe I'll share like all of that. I'll definitely share that kind of stuff with you before I leave. And we do house parties. So people will kind of open up their home and invite their friends, and we'll do things like that. But, you know, we write grants. I mean, there's opportunities for people doing this type of work. And people have, at least, you know, so far it's been, you know, for lack of a better word, it's a sexy thing now to be involved with urban farming. You know what I'm saying? And in many respects, I mean, I guess that's good, but our organization might be a little bit different from other places in that, like, I'm running or involved in the decision-making in the organization, and a lot of the staff look like me in the organization. And so that is different about us. That is not necessarily like other organizations that do similar type of work. People have said, you know, or made aspersions to the fact that my counterpart is a white woman, and so I guess the money's safe because she's there. You know what I mean? And that has been said about our organization. But I guess they don't know that I'm, you know, kind of wearing those hats also. So, and our board, executive board, the director, not the director, but the chairman is a black woman. And so we are representative of the neighborhood in many respects. I live in the neighborhood. Many of us live in the neighborhood. So that's kind of another part of it that's a little different than other groups perhaps might be.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm very inspired by your work. And my curiosity is the scope, like how many garden sites do you have? And how did you get the money to buy the land? Do you lease any of the land? And my deeper question is, how do you engage young people and get them to want to participate in this?
So we have 3 sites that we work out of. One of them I don't know if it's the word lease, but we have an arrangement with the city. So they are the kind of the owners of the property, and we just, you know, we're able to work with them on that. The other site is owned by a private company called Mitchell Machine that is still on, it's like one of the last manufacturing companies in Mason Square. And so they let us use that space. It's a year-to-year thing, like we have to have a meeting with them every year, and, you know, I tell them that we won't do anything bad, and we will, you know, it's been that type of an arrangement. Mitchell Machine, they're good people. At least to us, they've been. I can't say they're good for the neighborhood, but they've been hospitable in terms of letting us use the space. And then the other site we bought from the city. We paid $2,000 and something to purchase that site. It had been kind of sitting there for a good 30, 35 years with nothing happening there. And what we had to do, this is kind of a long, I'm going to try to sum this up in about 35 seconds, but we essentially had to kind of create a plan around the site, working with regenerative, my tongue is falling out my mouth today. Regenerative Design Group. We had a young woman that was working with us from Albany. No, she was from Buffalo. So we kind of worked with some people, with her and some other folks, to design what we wanted to see there. Presented that to the city and to the neighborhood councils that were around us. So we got support from the neighborhood councils, and then we approached the city council. And there was an RFP and what have you that was kind of created, basically saying that the space should be utilized for, or was open to be utilized for farming. And that gave us an entry into making the purchase. I think they didn't anticipate what we were going to do. And we didn't tell them necessarily. So I think as things began to, when this greenhouse went up and then the farm stand went up, I think a lot of people were a little shocked. Because Warner Street is a very frequented thoroughfare. A lot of people are coming to Springfield from the south and from the south to get to other parts of Springfield, and a lot of people go that way also to get back to places like Forest Park and Long Meadow. From what I understand, the mayor drives by there a lot too. So they, so that must have been a shock for people to see what was happening. How do we get the kids? Slight bribery in the form of a stipend. And for many young people, we can't say it's a job because we could, have problems. So it's a program, but for many of them, they look at it as a job, so they say this is their first job. And the skills that they develop over time are, I wish I had something like that when I was a kid. Because we haven't had any young person that worked with us for more than a year apply for a job and not get it. Which for us sucks because we're losing kids, which is part of the reason why we kind of had to revamp our youth program in the last few months, because we were losing young people that we had invested a lot of time into to jobs that were like, okay, I'm not mad at you, you want to work for a pizza place, but and they do pay more. I know you got your eye on a car, that So I don't discourage them to do that sort of stuff, but I try to. We have decided to encourage them to stay by offering restructuring the youth part of the organization.
And how old are they roughly?
From like middle school right up until I would say first year college or so, depending on if they go to college in the area.
Yeah.
A lot of them will come and still hang out with us.
Would you ever consider taking elementary students?
We allow them to come, the shorties. We allow the shorties to come, mostly on the weekends. Like on Saturday usually is a day we'll have like a kind of a volunteer open day or whatever. But generally speaking, like kind of joining the program, we try to keep it to at least middle school and the upper end of middle school, just because of some of the equipment that we use can if they're not using it properly, they can get hurt. The young, it's funny because sometimes that age group works a lot harder than the teenagers. So I'm torn. But the work can get really hard for the younger ones, depending on the time of the year. But we always encourage the young people, that age group, to come. As long as someone's there to kind of help us instruct them on how to approach things, it's never been a problem.
Do the young people get stipends as well?
All the young, anyone that joins the program gets a stipend. It has in the past we've done different kind of contortions of different things. Now we're doing like kind of a flat $11 a day. But like the minimum wage, we want to see that go up. I would love to pay them a lot more. Depending on the time of the year and the level of their commitment, it goes up. So just someone that we would just join, that would join the program, for instance, for say like the 2 months in the summer, for June, July, August, they would start at $11 a day. And that would be about 3 to 4 days a week. And depending on what's going on, 3 to 4 hours a day. Yeah, about that.
11 a day or 11 an hour?
11 a day. If it was 11 an hour, I would be offering the job to some of y'all probably. Exactly.
How's the community response to purchasing the food that you run?
Well, that's part of the big question right now. We opened up the farm stand in July. And since that time, we have had some tremendous days, and we've had some slow days. I would say, generally speaking, the response has been tremendous, but we have a lot of work to do. We don't have a sign in the front of the building yet. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that I don't think even I thought about necessarily prior to this thing being constructed. And I would say that, when we wanted to build a farm stand way back in the day, I didn't think it would be anything like what we ended up with. And the reason why we have what we have is because we began to ask ourselves questions like, for instance, if we want to sell in the wintertime, it's going to be cold out here. So we're going to need 4 walls. If we're going to have 4 walls, that means we need a ceiling. If we're going to have a ceiling, that means we're going to need light. That means we're going to need heat. That means we're going to need a bathroom. We're going to need running water. So all of these things began to come into the picture. And what we ended up with was essentially a house. As it was being built, I was like, I want to move into this building because it was really nice. And but we didn't anticipate that as we were, that's just something that as the process went on, like we started to ask these questions of what we wanted. And I think it got to the point where we didn't want to settle for just a little thing with a cover on it. We thought that the community deserved more and deserved better. So we tried to get a beautiful building, and I think that's what we accomplished. Now, building it, I think there's that movie with the baseball thing. I forgot the metaphor, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure y'all been around. Exactly. So now we're working on that part of it. And so, it's been a combination of how to, what kind of things are we going to grow for the building, for the people. This is the first 8 months of this thing has been an experiment. We had some ideas because we've run farmers markets for the entire time that this organization has been in existence. But that's a little bit different than having a permanent location that you then have to keep open. You have to, things run out, And what about distribution? What type of food do we want to really be bringing into this neighborhood? Do we want to sell lemons? Do we want to sell spinach that comes from Mexico? Or do we want to just keep everything local? And if we are going to keep everything local, how much is it going to cost to spend on something that we're not growing, that comes from a distributor who makes the price really high if it's organic, and then we have to try to convince people that why the price that we're selling it is the price that it is. And I think that we've learned a lot this summer and this fall and this winter particularly about the type of crops and how the price jumps up in the wintertime for a lot of things. And so, it's a learning process. But now we know, so we can anticipate that for next year, and we can begin to put those things in motion so that we can grow a lot more of the food that we're selling in the farm store.
Do you have the parents involved with the youth that come in and support this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the youth are at the age, or they try to act like they're at the age, but they don't have to tell their parents nothing. So we have done things to, keep the parents closer to the organization, like certain days where, and then, just kind of the daily interaction with some of them, because they pick their kids up, some of the parents. So we have that kind of going on. But the earlier kind of recruitment process involved a quick interview with the parents, not a quick interview, but like a way to introduce what we're doing with the parents. And we try to maintain communication with them throughout the season. And all the kids can bring home vegetables. So, some parents are like, yeah. Other ones are like, so, but we try to encourage them to take the food home and then try the food that we're growing, that they're growing. It's a nice thing.
Do you ever have cooking classes?
Yes, we do cooking demos. One of the staff is actually working on that right now. I'm kind of lining that up for the season. I don't know who to pick. Somebody talk.
You do collaboration with other firms because I was at Next Barn Over,
Mhm.
or as I like to call it, the Queer Barn, and you all did an event there, and I was just wondering about collaboration, whether it's events or sharing of seeds or equipment or help, problem solve, and what farms you have worked with. Also, do you have a wish list? And if you don't, start one so that people can drop in and be like, oh, this is what they're looking for, and help network, move stuff around. And then how much acreage is actually farmed?
Okay.
Because you have 3 sites, correct, that all produce to some degree.
It's a little under an acre. You asked a lot of good questions. I'm gonna try to think about what you said and answer all of that.
Collaborative.
Our biggest collaborator would be Next Barn Over, because they are they grow the food for the CSA that we do. We don't grow the food for the CSA. We used to just grow for the farmers market, but we felt that, and I feel that, having connections with other farms is important. And we encourage that, that communication. We encourage the farmers, to come down and talk with Ray, to come and talk and meet the people who she grows the food for. Other groups and things like that that we collaborate with, or would arise, on a few things. Seeds, we have been kind of going solo with that one. But I'm very open to those sorts of things. We have a wish list that usually involves like bikes and tools.
Is it on your site?
Yeah, I think that there is something there that talks about that. And of course, people who are interested in doing like a house party, like, that's always a fun event for us. So people are interested, you can hit us up on that. In the past, we have run into some troubles with collaborations and, partnerships. And so we really try to kind of make sure that we're clear about the type of folks that we collaborate with. Only because we've gotten burnt, and you live and you learn. Luckily, it's never been a situation that was detrimental to us, or I would hope our reputation around the area. But, it happens, and you have to grow from those sorts of things, and,
This is a related question, which is that I wonder whether any of your graduates, in effect, go on to work at other area farms, because obviously you're, as you say, with Hadley Soil, surrounded by a tremendous amount of agriculture, but often with a very different model. And I'm wondering if any of your graduates go into that, or if they've done some of their own entrepreneurial projects where they, in fact, get to be a part of the leadership of something.
So I can mostly speak for the young people that I have been around. It's been one of our, kind of one of the things that we haven't really been able to do effectively, which is to reach back to some of those original people and kind of see what folks are doing, with the exception of maybe a few here and there. Mostly because we don't have the capacity to do it, that has been an issue that we've had in a lot of areas. But what I have learned, and that, in my communication with the youth that I have had in contact with, many of them have gone on to participate in food-related things on their campuses if they have gone to college. I think that a greater number of them have definitely changed the way that they eat based on their involvement with us. And if they don't necessarily change the way that they eat, they are really ready to yell at other people who are not eating correctly. So we want Yes, that is the first step, is to ridicule and degrade. That's the first step, and I think we've accomplished that greatly.
Well, I thank you. This is wonderful. You are a co-director and you speak a lot using the word we. We do this, we do that. And I wonder if you could speak a little to the decision-making process, how you decide on your strategy, your goals.
Well, I live in a neighborhood, right? And, there's a lot of things happening in the neighborhood that are not good. And, kind of being there, on a daily basis, and, I need to eat too. And trying to find food that has a certain understanding, trying to find the food that is good for you is difficult. And I keep that in mind when we are planning out our year. The youth are part of that process. They're part of, thinking about what we have grown in the past, what has sold, what varieties offer the best sort of nutrients for the kind of things that we feel people in our community are suffering from. So we look at it in that way. We look at it in terms of, there's definitely we want to be able to sell a good amount of the food, so we look at it from that perspective too. And there's, there's not, I don't make all the decisions in these days. It's definitely a consensus. And we have a board, and our board the board doesn't move on a particular thing unless everybody agrees. So when we are voting on a process, it's never like, well, 4 people like it, and 3 people hate it, but we're going to do it anyway. It's more of, okay, if 3 people are unsure, we need to know why they're unsure. And if it's something that we feel needs to happen, we need to get them on board. I remember when we made the decision that everyone, whether it's the staff or the board, and the youth, would need to do an Undoing Racism workshop in order to stay in their position. At that time, there was a couple of people on the board who decided that they weren't going to stay anymore. But we felt as an organization, as both of the directors, the staff, we felt that that was important because in order to deal with racism, we had to be able to speak in the same language. We couldn't have, one person couldn't understand racism as what happens when white guys put on white sheets and go out and hang people. Okay, that is racism, that's an aspect of it, but it's definitely not, this older black guy who, doesn't like Chinese people and voices his opinion sometimes. That's not necessarily racism, from our understanding. And so we have had to kind of, we have at that, when we were having that discussion, we really felt that it was important that everybody has a similar vocabulary and that we looked at race from the perspective of what has happened in America and found a group that addressed that need that we felt we had. And so, those sorts of things, those sorts of decisions will happen as a group.
Yeah, you
Now,
want to have shared values.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can
Absolutely.
you proceed?
Especially around something like race, because in one respect, there's for people in my community, we're dying over these sorts of issues. So it's not necessarily something that we want to play around with. We want to be clear about what's happening. I don't want to lie to my sons and tell them a reality that don't exist. I don't tell my son there's a Santa Claus. I know some of y'all might hate that. But that's just, I don't tell my son that there's Santa Claus. I don't want my son to think that I ever told him something that wasn't true. So I don't rock with that. And I'm Muslim, so that's another thing to it. So that kind of adds a layer of complexity of perhaps that doesn't really rock with that. But, you know, I don't like get in his case about it, but I just let him know. I'm not going to lie to my kids about nothing. And I think that, you know, kind of being truthful is important in working with young people. I hope I answered the question a little bit. Thank you.
Could you talk about the bicycles a little?
So when the person, one of the people who, the director before me was Kristen Brennan. She and her family, they're biking everywhere. They don't own a car. They are like city homesteader type of people. So they have a little area in the city where they're growing food and they have a CSA and they're making it work. And but they're biking all the time. So she brought that mentality into the organization. And it used to be that they would just bike in the produce to the farmer's market. We were doing that for a number of years. I even did that a number of times with these, you know, we have these big trailers and everything. And then once we started to do the CSA, we incorporated the biking into delivery. So when we do the CSA in the summer, there's a group of youth that they have the trailers and then they go out and they deliver the food. So biking kind of has become a big part of the identity of the organization. And I think that, you know, we kind of have maintained that.
It also gives you a real presence, like people see you.
Yeah,
You know, it's kind of advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the logo. It's what people see a lot when they're, you know, in the neighborhood. Like they get used to like these kids riding around. I mean, we used to, when we used to do these markets, man, the kids would pile so much on these carts. It looked like they were homeless just driving around the city. Because literally, like, they would just throw everything onto these carts.
Is that the logo on your sweatshirt?
Yeah, that's the logo. Yeah, my little sons, they think that that's me. So I don't tell them it's not.
I don't think I need the mic. I'm going to okay. Just take a chance and possibly speak for everybody here to say it feels like a tremendous gift that you're here today sharing what you're sharing and really inspiring. I hope you're recognizing that you are inspiring a lot of us. So the work that you did is tremendous. Incredible ideas. I also wanted to offer, if you're going to keep talking for a while, do you need a refill of your cup?
Well, I mean, I maybe got another 10 minutes. But we can, thank you. Good. Thank you.
Anyway, and it would be wonderful to go visit sometime.
Yeah, well, don't come now. Nobody come now. I would suggest after March 15th, you know, join our mailing list. Our website is gtcspringfield.org or gardeningthecommunity.org. And there's a mailing list. And so we'll be doing like volunteer days. Most Saturdays, once it gets warmer, we do volunteer days, kind of open volunteer days. If people were interested in bringing like more than 3 people with them, then you would need to email us and we could work out, you know, whatever details that we would need to work out to make that happen. We don't charge people to come to our site. I know I've heard that in other places, like you call them up, can we visit or do a tour? And they'll be like, yeah, it's $100, or, you know, just to walk around. So we don't charge people. Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. And I'm not mad at that. You know, I'm not. Yeah, I get it, but we don't do that. So if you have more than 3 people, or I mean, if you want to just come down, like the farm stand is open Wednesday and Thursday from 11 to 7, so you can at least see that part of it if you're interested. We're on 200 Walnut Street in Springfield, and everybody here is invited. It's a party.
Do you have literature with all these addresses? or handout or something?
I didn't bring anything.
But you can just Google gardening the community. That's how I've done it several times in the process of planning this. So that'll find it. And there's I put some papers over here where you can write your email address if you want to get on their email list. And there's a bucket for donations.
Is the bucket for donations for gardening?
For gardening the community.
Okay.
On the little white table.
I have another question. What would you say makes your program work? What really makes your program work? Because you're working with children, and I work with children, so I know there has to be something other than.
Well, I think it's a few things. I think one is we're given, we trust them, you know what I mean? And we tell them the truth. And we don't, we're not selling them a lofty, the reality is what it is, and it can be harsh at times. I think that we've created a space where they feel appreciated. I think we created a space where they're challenged in many ways to go beyond what they might think of where they're at in that moment. I think that many of them can see a way, and hopefully it's, they have see the way for them to, to be rewarded for putting effort into participating fully. They see something that they can gain for themselves in that. And the stipend plays a big part in it. And then I think a safe space, because we have various levels of kids and various levels of ways that they learn and various levels of things that have happened to them, various kind of situations that they're coming from and that they have to go back to when they leave us. And I think that we have, and the staff too have, we care about these young people. And I think that they know that. Youth, this is youth development work, for lack of a better term. There's not really any professional academy to go to become a youth development person. But, a lot of it, I think, is just about, having very, being sensitive to the situations that young people are in, and giving them, like I said, like all the things that I mentioned, giving them a space to be, with no regards whether or not they're getting good grades or whether or not they're on, suspended or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's not a part of it. You don't have to be an A student to come work with us. You don't have to speak perfect English to work with us. You can be a criminal or have had that in your past, and you can still come and work with us. So I think that plays a part in them finding and claiming the space. And I'm a little crazy. I can be a little weird, and I think that they know that, so it's fun. And that's the other thing. I think it's fun.
So it sounds like you're creating a community within the community with the students, and then the vegetables are like the byproduct. The main thing is the kids.
Yeah. For me, the main thing is
I like that you're called Gardening the Community instead of Gardening in the Community, because that's what you're saying.
I don't need a microphone.
It's easier for other people.
You had mentioned that you had come to a consensus about everyone involved needed to go to a study program around racism. So was there a particular program or a particular group that help facilitate this that we might know about and
Yeah.
could
there's,
take advantage of?
The name of the folks that we work with is the People's Institute, based out of New Orleans.
I'm sorry,
The People's Institute.
people in school.
And, you know, kind of the formal name of the workshop, I believe, is Undoing Racism. And there's a coalition, you know, honestly, the reason why I heard about it was because my counterpart is a member of the group that kind of does these workshops around the New England area. Yes, I don't have it on hand, but, you know, if anybody's interested.
So the group that Ibrahim is talking about that's based in Springfield is called UROC, U-R-O-C. And if you Google UROC, I think it's of Western Mass.
Yep.
They've got a Facebook and they've got a website.
Yep.
And they are the hosts for the Undoing Racism trainings, which is the name of the workshop. A lot of the people who are central in racial justice rising have, I mean, that's how most of us came together, is through those workshops, through Undoing Racism workshops.
And there's one, I think, that's happening in February at our office, the building where we have our office. You know, that's where I initially had met the person that is now my other counterpart, like I mentioned, Ann Richmond. Because I was like, who is this white lady looking like, you know, what's the name of that old TV show? The one with the little kid that always gets into trouble. Yeah, like she looked like that, the mother. But she was like, she's this fierce white lady talking about all this stuff. So I was like, wow, she's cool. And then come to find out, you know, when we were seeking people to play the role of my kind of counterpart, she was one of the people who applied. And I immediately was like, yeah, I rock with this lady. She's cool.
What is her name?
Ann Richmond.
I would also just give a personal testimonial. I did the workshop in June in 2018, and it was transformative. It was totally fabulous. So I really encourage everybody to take a look at it and do it if you can.
It's very challenging for many people.
Yeah.
It's very challenging, and I think that is why it is effective. Because it's not about tolerance and not about, you know, some of these other words that it might carry some weight in other places, but I think it doesn't really reflect the reality of what's happening. I think that this particular workshop really deals with the history part of it.
And there's one in February at your place that is open to other us.
Yeah. There is a fee. I'm not really sure. You can go to UROC and check that out. But yeah, it's definitely happening.
It's kind of pricey, and that can be daunting for people, but they do offer some scholarships. I can tell you that if you go to Racial Justice Rising's website, we've got a link on the events page to that workshop. So that might make it a little easier to sign up for it. And they're listed by date. You know, the things on that page are listed by date.
Is it okay if we take your picture on our cell phones?
No, I'm just kidding. I got to message you a little bit.
I wonder if you'd say a little, more about hip hop. Because I know a little about agriculture, but almost nothing about hip hop. So I'm trying to work the metaphor the other way.
No doubt. That's like I could spend the next 2 hours talking about that.
But what are you listening to? I mean, what you have a label? I mean, where would you steer us to?
Well, that's a good question.
Is this going to go down as the funniest question?
No, not at all. Where would I steer one to?
Well, there's that really good documentary that is just out about, about raucous and have you seen it? I
No.
was in a hotel room and just like landed on it, and it's, you know, really.
You can use the mic, we can all hear you.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, I'll ask my son. My son was with me when we were traveling, and we landed on a documentary by all the, you know, living first.
You know what I would, not to
Yeah,
cut you off,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know what I would do? I would go to a show. You know what I mean? Like, and in that way, you're supporting the local whatever scene. And you'll see what it is that it could be. Now, I can't vouch for the quality of what you might see, but that's where I would start. You know what I'm saying? Like, go to a show and just look for yourself. You know what I mean?
Netflix has a hip hop revolution
Yeah,
series
yeah,
that's
you know.
got some 411 on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely gives you a background.
But, you know, I would tell you, you know, like anything else, a lot of things are a lot deeper than the surface. And what you're seeing out there in the world oftentimes are what is the hip-hop culture. And many people would just equate that to black culture, unfortunately. Or, you know, but I would just say that hip-hop is definitely like the impact has been traced through kind of black folks and whatnot.
Sure.
You know, there's so many ways to tackle that question. You know what I mean? I mean, you can even go back to the drum and just follow, trace that to get to hip hop right now. You can go to African American classical music, jazz, and you can trace hip hop through that and get to today. So, you know, again, I mean, like, you're lucky. I actually am a little envious because you are about to embark on an incredible journey, my friend. And you're going to hear things for the first time that I might have taken for granted. Like, I love it, you know, and I do this a lot. Like, I'll play records for people, and to see their reaction is almost like it's a mirror of how I reacted to certain things coming up. And I think that that's why I'm envious, because you're going to hear some of these things for the first time, and it might blow your head off. And you might be disgusted. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It really depends on your sensibilities. But good luck, man. You know what I mean? Like, you know, good luck on that journey, man. That's right.
Are we coming up on your pumpkin time?
I gotta leave. But
two questions. One is, do you talk about hip hop with your kids? The kids that work in the program?
yes, it is an ongoing joke that I have some sort of past involved with this music, and they tease me sometimes. Like we'll be talking about something and then put on a song of mine to try to let me know that they know that they know what I did. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things. But I do talk about it with them because they want to hear some of their music that they like, and I want to listen to it because I want to see what it is, and then I want to talk about it badly because most of it is not that good. But it's just I'm a elitist, kind of nerdy hip hop person, and I have the curse or the blessing of having come up, and during the time of my formative years was spent dealing when a lot of the best music was coming out, and a lot of the best labels and record things, and different time than now. So I have that kind of history and perspective that they don't have. So I can be as judgmental as I want. And they don't like it, but I can also pique them and share with them things that are really important to the foundation and understanding of the music part of the hip-hop world, which then can translate and can change into different other kind of conversations about the politics around music, the politics of why this even started in the first place, and make all those connections for them. So we definitely have those discussions.
Cool. And my other question is, do you have any sort of like daily, like explicit team building activities that you do, like every morning before you get to work, you do some, say good morning to each other in a certain way, or is there like a celebration of everyone's hard work at the end of the season or something?
Yeah. I mean, the daily thing, I think that, there's times when we're a little bit on that more so than others. I like that idea of kind of getting people together in those ways. It's not always the thing that we do. It just kind of depends on the group feel of it. But I like those sorts of things. I think in the summer we do a lot of the, kind of icebreakers and stuff when we first are getting acquainted with each other during that time of the growing season. What was the other thing, guys? About the...
Do you have like a celebration at the end of the season?
Yes. I mean, part of it, that pancake breakfast is one thing that happens. But, in the summertime, we will do like a few barbecues for the youth. And we do one for the parents every summer, which is fun. And for the neighborhood, we do that too.
On average, how many students do you have, and are they just from the community, or did they come from throughout Springfield, or?
Most of the young people that we work with are all of them are from Springfield, and I would say more than half live within walking distance. I think we probably could open it up a little bit more. And I'm sorry, and then the number. So we're working right now, it's about 15 youth who are doing our winter kind of activity curriculum, which is, like I said, more theoretically based on trying to get them to understand what has happened in our neighborhood and what has happened in the bigger food, kind of the bigger food system issues, and kind of looking at that. What has happened? Like there's reasons why there's no supermarkets in Springfield. Why did that happen? And so this is the time when we can do that. We have a little bit of these winter months when we look at other times. Yeah, they come after school and on Saturday. Actually, in 10 minutes they will be in our meeting area in our office.
So Ibrahim, thank you so much for coming. It's been so interesting to hear the kind of the evolution of the gardening with the community, gardening the community. And I was curious if you could mention a little bit more about the intersection of racial justice and the food justice. And you just mentioned it about there's not so little grocery stores in Springfield area. And then in the very beginning, I heard you mention about land not being available to African Americans. And for instance, our history is that after slavery, they were African were promised a mule and 40 acres, and that didn't happen. And so I'm wondering if you could elaborate more on those intersections.
Well, I definitely am a pro-reparations type of person, for sure. I think that if Jewish folks and Chinese people and to a lesser extent Native, the Native folks that were here, if they were able to receive some sort of reparations, there definitely needs to be something for African Americans. I just don't think that, I think the price tag is so high that it makes it very difficult for people to grasp that number. And then to have the political kind of understanding and willingness to really advocate for that is a totally another thing to it. But that set aside, unfortunately, you know, I think we haven't come to terms with a lot of things around race in our country, thus the organization that you're a part of. And I think that we have, you know, there's kind of two dynamics here. Bless you, for many white folks, there's an unwillingness, I guess. I'm not white, so I can't really speak on this directly, but I guess that there'd be an unwillingness to really want to have to look back at that history and look at those pictures and deal with that reality because it's painful. It's a lot more painful for us, perhaps, being the brunt of that oppression. But you know, at the same time, there is a space for everybody to begin to learn and heal from this thing. If we as a society and as a country are willing to make those steps, I don't know if we're there yet. I think a person that we have in our president is a good way to be, and I think it's been slowly happening, that people are now being forced to deal with some of these things in a way that they've never had to deal with it before because he's such a foolish person. And but I think that he also is steering people in a very wrong direction because a lot of the white folks that are his constituency or whatever probably wouldn't be that way if the more, I guess, liberal, for lack of a better word, if people were standing on more solid principles, perhaps he wouldn't have so many people going to his side. But I don't know if people are, and this is way off the subject, but I don't know whether or not people are willing to really question the foundations of this Western world in a way that will allow for another conversation to take place around race and things like that. I mean, in order to look at our conditions, we have to look at our economics, in my opinion, through a moral lens. And I don't know if people see that as a way to look at it. There's a lot of things that people, I mean, some people don't even think that there are any morals in the world at all, depending on who you talk to, particularly people from the school of neocons, whatever you want to call them, people, like they come from a school where they just have completely disregarded morality altogether. So that's what we're dealing with, philosophical issues that are very deep and entrenched, and they have the microphone that speaks the loudest. And groups like this don't really get no play on CNN. You don't see people who are Jewish against the things that Israel is doing in the news, but they exist. And so, you know, our food situation in Springfield is not popular necessarily. It might be popular for some groups to kind of cling on to some of these issues, but to really have to directly deal with them is not necessarily in everybody's DNA. We live in a neighborhood, a lot of the folks in our staff and whatnot, so we are dealing with this on a daily basis. But, you know, I'm hopeful that you know, things like this exist, and this is why I came here today. Just because I want to be inspired, maybe perhaps as some people might be inspired by anything I may have said today that resonated. Yeah. So I got like 5 more minutes.
So,
2
5 more minutes?
12 o'clock.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you?
What do you grow?
We grow, that's a good question. We grow a lot of things. I think another interesting question would be how we grow too. And I think for us that would be the most important thing because we work with young people, so we have to be very conscious of the things that we are putting around them and what we're putting in the ground. And then we are looking at things that we grow that are going to affect the ailments that people have in our neighborhood. And we want to do it, this is like so much, and we want to do it in a way that is affordable for us and for the community, and sustainable. It's a lot. But, you know, name something you like. We probably are trying to grow it in some capacity, especially if it's a vegetable. I mean, all the things that you would think of in the summertime, we're doing that. And then like a few like weirdo things, like we try to grow moringa trees in our greenhouse, and a bunch of weirdo herbs that that are
Do you get a
beneficial.
pulse from the neighborhood, what they want?
What happened?
Do you get a pulse from the neighbors and ask them?
Yeah. I mean, like, and because we have this farm stand, it's a real clear way to see what people are voting for. You know what I mean? Like they come in and they buy what they think is good for them and what they like, and having that information to then make a decision about it is priceless. I mean, like, we can see what has happened over the course of a year, what has sold the best. So, we're learning that, there's people love kale, among other things, and in our neighborhood, they love fruit, So we're trying to accommodate those things in many ways.
Do you sell like chicken or meat from other farmers?
No, we do sell eggs. But no chicken, no meat, mostly because when you start to do chicken and meat, it's like a lot of other things kind of come into play, particularly like how it's stored and whatnot, like things like that. I would like to, there's a fish CSA in the region. I'm not sure if it's affordable for everybody that would want to do it, but I'm thinking about maybe bringing them into the fold. And we have a freezer, but we want to sell ice cream out of there. Yeah, priorities, man. We have a guy that up the street that can make ice cream out of the raspberries that we grow. So, and it's really good. Like, yeah.
Do you get many or any white kids?
Yes, we do.
What's that like ratio like?
It depends on the year, it seems like. One of my little ace buddy there, Sean, he's the one I mentioned that went to go work at a pizza place. But he's actually still on our board. But yeah, we get, depending on the year, like I said, we'll get like an influx. One time we had a family of homeschooled, I don't want to say they were fundamentalist Christian young people, but they were like, they definitely were like not part of the more traditional kind of American thing. Now they weren't Quakers or anything like that, but they lived away from the normal kind of thing. But they were great kids, you know what I mean? And I think they learned a lot, you know what I mean? I hope they learned a lot being with us in our craziness.
Is there someone on staff that works on racial issues with the kids, or is that just part of what
It's
you
part of
do together?
everything we do. I mean, it never is, it's just a part of the DNA. There's not like a section that this is the racial time. Like, it's kind of just like what it comes up in various ways, so we deal with it then.
Good work.
Thank you so much for having me.